I know everyone thinks that fasting is the secret to weight loss, to blood sugar balance, and to longevity. But here's the truth. Most of those studies were done on men or postmenopausal women, not women who are actively menstruating, have active cycles. So if you're cycling, the way you fast could be absolutely tanking your hormones and wrecking your energy and making your periods horrible. So I want to break down for you how fasting is actually impacting your hormones, when it can help, and when it's the worst idea ever. I do want to go over and share with you one way across the board that is a very safe fast for most every woman, and you can safely benefit from it without wrecking your cycle. So let's break this down. Why did fasting get so popular? Well, it does improve insulin sensitivity. It does lower blood sugar. It does increase autophagy. But again, like I said, this is being studied on men and postmenopausal women. Men have a 24-hour hormonal rhythm. We have a 28, 36 day, depending on how long your cycle is. So it doesn't make sense to take all of this data that was done on a man, who has different hormone fluctuations and apply it across the board to us. I mean, let's just think about it. For example, estrogen increases our sensitivity to insulin, while progesterone makes us less sensitive to insulin. So depending on where you would, for example, have done this study on a woman where she is in her cycle, you're going to get different results. So, why can't we just do, multiple studies? Because it's expensive. So it just unfortunately doesn't have the research in it that we would love. And so if we take the studies that are done on men and just try and apply them to a menstruating woman, you guys, we're not small men. Okay. So we're missing a gap here. Men, their most dominant hormone is testosterone. Well, ours are supposed to be estrogen and progesterone. Yes, we have testosterone, but not at the level that men do. And so what happens here is testosterone is not as impacted by stress as progesterone is for women. So this makes a really big deal when we're looking at our overall reproductive system and fertility. Even if you're not trying to get pregnant, all of those hormones play such a role in your fat burning, in your overall mood and demeanor, your digestion, literally everything. So even if you're not trying to get pregnant, it's so important to make sure that we're optimizing our fertility and optimizing our hormones, because I don't know about you, but I want to have metabolic flexibility, okay? And fasting may not be the best thing for you, especially across the board. So let's just think about this. Does fasting lower insulin? Yes, but it also raises cortisol levels. And it has been shown to lower LH pulsatility if calorie restriction has gone too far within 5 days. That is a very short time frame. So if you think about your LH hormone, okay, so you have your cycle here to here. LH hormone, that surge, it's if you ever do ovulation strips, that's what it's testing, is your LH, your luteinizing hormone. It is what surges, is what triggers an ovulation. So you can imagine if what you're doing is impacting your LH levels, is it therefore going to be impacting your ovulation, which therefore is going to be impacting your progesterone, which is your keep calm, carry on hormone? Yes, it is, because we produce progesterone by ovulating. Okay, that follicle that releases the egg forms what's called the corpus luteum, which is what produces your progesterone. Okay, so that's one indirect way that we're already impacting progesterone levels. Okay, and so symptoms that I often see across the board with women who are dealing or who've been trying fasting is irregular cycles, thinning hair, irritability, snapping at their kids, snapping at basically everyone, lowered energy, and even insomnia. And oftentimes you think, okay, I just need to be more disciplined. Your body just thinks you're starving, which brings me to a very controversial point. But truly, I think that for a lot of women, intermittent fasting is a very fancy way of not eating enough. Okay. Just because we put it into the category of intermittent fasting, it's a diet, right? You still can't grossly undereat, right? Just because you're trying to shrink the time frame in which you're consuming calories, if you are still under consuming calories, that's going to impact your hormones. And I know if you want to lose weight, you want to bring your calories down, but not to that such extreme, not to such an extreme that it's going to impact your other hormones, because that's going to backfire on you. And then you're stuck and you can't lose weight no matter what, because your body is literally stuck in fight or flight. Okay. So a lot of times when you first start feeling amazing with fasting, you have more energy, you're feeling great, you could go all day, and you're just feeding off of adrenaline. Okay. So there's a lot of things that you want to consider when it comes to fasting. And I will say that it's very easy to A, undereat, B, still be imbalancing your blood sugar in your eating window, which is going to set you up for being cranky and hangry and inflammation. So again, not setting you up well for the next day of fasting. It's going to be impacting your cortisol levels long-term, which is therefore going to be impacting your progesterone levels. And it's also, because it's impacting those cortisol levels, it's really not doing your adrenals any service. And adrenals are something we already ask so much of throughout our day-to-day with our everyday stress and emotional, physical, and now we're adding more internal stress to it. And then as we head into perimenopause and then postmenopause, when we ask our adrenals to, hey, do you think you could, make our progesterone now? Your adrenals are just like, screw you. You have not been taking care of me. Okay. So let's think about how we can take care of our body there. So that's part of the reason why you may feel really good, but then it backfires or it doesn't support you long term. Okay. You also need to think about your vital reserve. Okay. So something to kind of, think about is, if I see a woman, for example, who I ran her labs and she has no minerals, like she's very depleted, fasting is going to be so incredibly hard on her, even harder than somebody who has more of a vital reserve. Okay. So it's also important, before you're jumping into something like fasting, is to pay attention to where you're coming from. Have you been chronically dieting? Are you pretty much very much undernourished? If you are, fasting is really probably not going to help. Okay. Now let's talk about something I do like. Okay. And that is called circadian fasting. So circadian fasting is when you stop eating after your dinner and you don't start again until the next morning. This is typically about a 12-hour benefit. Okay. So this can be great for a lot of things. It aligns with your natural circadian rhythm of insulin sensitivity. You are naturally more insulin resistant later in the evening. So, this is where I think this myth kind of came from, is that anything you eat at night goes straight to your hips. I really think it does come from that fact that your body is less sensitive to insulin at nighttime. So it's helping support your natural circadian insulin sensitivity, but it's supporting digestion and blood sugar. So you are getting those benefits of having, not eating food for that period of time, but without triggering your stress hormones. Okay. If you've been struggling to balance your hormones naturally, even though you feel like you're doing all of the things, you have low energy, you have irregular cycles, you can't get rid of the weight gain, you have PMS, you have painful periods, it's tied to your hormones, but you're very overwhelmed by all of the health information out there on what to eat, what supplements you should focus on, what lifestyle things you should change, what labs you should run. It's overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there. I have a free mini course that goes over all of the reasons why you're still struggling, even though you feel like you're doing all of the right things. And on top of that, I'm going to go over the 3 pillars, the 3 steps that are so vitally important when it comes to balancing your hormones naturally. No matter what your symptom is, this is going to apply to you, because these 3 pillars and these 3 steps are so vitally important for every single woman who's dealing with hormonal imbalance. So it's yours. All you have to do is go to the QR code and go ahead and join. It will get sent right to your inbox and you can get started today and start feeling better. So some ways to really pay attention to this as well is making sure that dinner is so solid that it's going to sustain you the entire night. Okay. Something else I want to bring to your attention is the fact that obviously at nighttime, you're going to be starting to produce melatonin, right? And what's really, really interesting is that you have better glucose tolerance in the absence of melatonin. So obviously, it doesn't really make sense to be eating very late at night when you're wanting your body to start producing melatonin. It's kind of working against you if your goal is to have more balanced blood sugar, which is why, again, it's kind of backwards to me a little bit that we always try and have that fasting window so early in the morning, which again, you can push your fasting window if you're doing intermittent fasting however you would like. But most people tend to fast for as long as they can in the morning, maybe consuming things with caffeine to try and suppress any hunger hormones, which again isn't doing your adrenals any favors. And then consuming the calories later at night, which isn't even going with your body's natural insulin circadian sensitivity rhythm. So it doesn't make sense, does it? It doesn't make sense. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay. So then let's take that to, so circadian fasting. Great. I often will use what I call follicular fasting. I don't think I coined that term. It's not a term. It's just fasting, in your follicular phase, but it's not the whole follicular phase. It's not any part. It's literally one day. It's one day a cycle. That's it. Then go back to your circadian fast. And it is one day in your follicular phase where you can nudge your eating window. You'll eat your last meal of the day earlier. So maybe you push it to 3 if you typically eat at 6 or something along those lines. And it's just one time during your follicular phase. And that is the time when you're going to have the least impact on your stress hormones. Okay. Estrogen is already starting to come up during that phase, and estrogen helps increase your sensitivity to insulin. So if you set yourself up well and making sure that last meal is sitting with those low glycemic carbs, getting enough protein, getting enough fat, getting enough fiber, you can sustain yourself totally fine till breakfast. And that's a good way to increase a fasting window to help increase your sensitivity to insulin without impacting the stress hormones. It's relatively quite easy to do. We do adapt and change that with our clients depending on what's going on with their cycle and things like that, because that's not something I'm going to recommend if we have someone that comes in. I'm not even going to recommend the one day. If we have someone that comes in with 4 lows, I'm just not going to do it. Someone that has very depleted minerals for their adrenals, not going to recommend it. Okay. So all things to take into consideration when you are thinking about fasting. Like I said, across the board, I think that circadian fast is a great one. I think it is beneficial for a lot of women. I think it's going to help increase your metabolization of insulin simply just by not eating after dinner. So you melatonin isn't going to impact your usage of glucose. Okay. So and then secondly, you naturally are more insulin resistant at nighttime. So just stop eating at that time. Okay. But it's important that you make sure that you're getting in enough calories throughout the day. Oftentimes you're going to overeat in the evening if you're under eating the rest of your meals. And I see this a lot. If you're trying to lose weight, you're like, okay, cut the calories. But then you're so depleted by the time you reach the end of the day when you have decision fatigue. You've literally been making decisions all day. You're most likely your stress bucket is starting to overflow because you haven't been paying attention to it all day, and you need some type of dopamine hit. And so we overeat at the end of the day, which is why we're also just not setting ourselves up for success here. Okay. So like I said, I think that circadian fast is something that is a very safe option for most women. Again, none of this is medical advice, but then you can bring that in to help support you. Like I said, I don't really think that fasting is evil. It's just context dependent. And when you use it wrong and you try and do these extreme fasts, especially when you're trying to lose weight, it's not serving your body. And if your goal is to have more balanced blood sugar, your goal is to have optimal hormones, your goal is to be metabolically flexible, I really don't think that the extreme fasting is going to be serving you as a woman. Okay. So maybe try out circadian fast. Maybe try out what I'm about to talk about. besides circadian fast. I think that one's great. Blood sugar balance. Let's just start with blood sugar balance. Blood sugar balance also helps balance your blood sugar, and it also can increase your sensitivity to insulin. Walla bam, walla boom. Okay, so let's try that. So eat within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. Try and hit your 30 grams. Don't try. Hit your 30 grams of protein. Get your fiber. Get your low glycemic carbs in at breakfast, and never eat a naked carb. It's literally that simple. Literally. I know blood sugar balance can be so over the top, but if you start here and then you start with not eating a naked carb, you're off to a fabulous start. Okay. Yes, we can get super nuanced. We're going to, we do that with our clients because they're looking for optimal health. But if you're just looking to start, that's where I would start. Okay. Get those 30 grams of protein, get your fiber in, and don't eat a naked carb. By eating a naked carb, that would be like grabbing an apple and going and walking out. No, add a hard-boiled egg to it, add some nuts to it. Okay. I want you to really think about nourishment before restriction. Okay. So when you're doing the circadian fast and you're not eating all night, like if you try and eat like a haphazard dinner that's very high glycemic and doesn't have any fiber and doesn't have enough protein, you're going to be starving. Okay. So no fasting window is going to save you if you aren't eating enough calories in your eating time. Okay, so please make sure that you're nourishing your body. Your body is going to take care of you and serve you if you nourish it. And by nourish it, it means give it the fuel it needs to work properly. Okay. Also think about your minerals. Okay. So mineral health, mineral replenishment is so important. If you're going to try and fast with very depleted minerals, it's like pouring gas on a fire. Okay. So yes, you can run a hair tissue mineral analysis, but also just bringing in mineral rich foods is going to serve you very well. And that means like micronutrient dense food. Everyone goes, oh, you mean vegetables? Beef liver is actually one of your most micronutrient dense foods. That's not a vegetable. I think you should also eat vegetables too, but just saying. Okay, the other thing to think about how to exit and enter your fast is going to be really important. Okay, so break your fast with protein, not sugar and coffee. Okay, we recently had a client that did a lot of fasting, and she would always break her fast with things that would include dates and coffee, and she had wildly high glucose, like wildly. And she would fast for very long periods of time. And we really had to take an overall look at what are our goals here? How can we nourish our body so it doesn't think that it's starving and needs to hold on to everything that you are feeding it because it doesn't know when it's going to eat again. Okay. And her glucose, literally by just eating more food and being regular with it and paying attention to blood sugar balance with her meals, her glucose started regulating. And it can with you too. Okay. So sometimes we think that intermittent fasting and fasting is going to be this quick fix for us when it comes to our health issues. And really, we have to make some sustainable long-term changes. I know, probably not what you want to hear, but important. Okay. So think about breaking your fast with protein and fiber and not sugar and coffee. These are my last thoughts I want to end you with. I would say the great majority of women who are looking to fasting to solve all their hormonal issues are typically already not nourishing their body at the level that it would need. Okay, you don't need to starve to heal. You need to support your hormones, not suppress them. Fasting isn't magic. It is cool when used correctly, but your hormones are cool too. And when you use them correctly, you can feel a lot better. Okay. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the glamour of like, oh my gosh, I did intermittent fasting and I lost 20 pounds in a month. It's also not very safe. Okay. So I really want you to think about eating for your hormones and not against them. working with your body and not against it. Okay. Circadian fast, working with your body. You have a natural circadian rhythm. Your body naturally is more insulin sensitive and become in the morning and becomes more insulin resistant in the evening. Okay. You have better glucose. You use glucose better in the morning. And you don't utilize it very well when you have more melatonin in your body in the evening. So just think about that. Like, think about how your body's naturally built up, and think about how we can naturally support it and go from there. And also, I want to leave you with one last thing. I'm sorry. I know I said all the last things. One last thing. Just because we don't respond the same as a man doesn't mean it's wrong. Just means it's different, and that's cool. Okay. So just because, the researchers out there don't want to do all of the cool studies on us as well, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. Okay. So, I do think it's very sad. I'm glad that we're being added to studies, but it wasn't until 1993 that women started getting added to these studies. So that was not that long ago. Okay.